Welcome to Silent Service. My name is Will. I'm on with my favorite professor from college, my alma mater, Rollins College. Professor Kroll is a fantastic person, fantastic professor, and I brought him on here today because he genuinely was my favorite professor after 5 years of college because he just cared more than the average professor. And um, to wrap things up, I'm just so happy you're here, Professor Kroll. Thank you so much. How are you?
I'm doing great, Will, and it's great to see you too. And I talk about you as you and I have discussed a lot about your career trajectory. And every time your name comes up, people just talk about what a great guy you are, how enthusiastic, and your personality, your style. And I was thrilled when you asked me. I've never done a podcast, so this is a first for me to jump on the podcast. And I got my pipe here, so I look very professorial with the pipe. That
It's the
so I
little things.
it's the little things that really matter in life. Again, for the children that are watching, there's no tobacco. No, we're going to be really safe with this here too. So, but
Right.
no, it's exciting, and I always love connecting with any alums, and it's especially gratifying. It's the best part of the job of seeing where you've taken things you learned in college, not just for me, and it's very flattering for you to say that I was your favorite professor, and I appreciate that. But I to see that you're applying what you're learning, and not just to like your business success, but to your life in general, finding a bigger meaning and a bigger purpose beyond just making money in what you're doing.
Yeah.
So thanks for having me.
For sure, of course. And I love the fact that you brought your pipe. In fact, this is a PG podcast. In fact, my mentor, who I co-host this podcast with, his name is Matt Morrow. He's also a Rollins alum, and we started this podcast together because through this mentor-mentee relationship, we wanted to memorialize these ideas that he shares with me, so that his future kids can have them in their back pocket, and mine too, of course. But his kids exist now, so that's the idea.
Got actual children that are there that they could, they could start seeing some of it. And it's a cool thing. I know it's 25 or 30 years ago, this wouldn't have been really that possible because you would have a camcorder. And if you wanted to do you might have done a radio talk show, but like this whole idea of podcasting and, you can go from the big guys like the New Heights with the Kelsey brothers and all
Yeah,
that happen. It's amazing the spread and the reach and also just the lifelong learning that can happen through people that you don't know at some point, and maybe today while we're talking, somebody tunes into this and it changes the direction of their life in some small way. So let's hope and pray that's what actually comes out of our conversation.
yeah, for sure. No, I'm very lucky to have this platform. Very lucky to have you join. I know some of your former students, some of my current friends listen to this podcast at work. For those that are, I hope you're doing well. Shout out to Melanie. Shout out to
Greetings,
Zane. Those lovely people. Um,
greetings to the
but
rock crew. Go Tars.
Go Tars indeed. Uh, Professor Cole, I haven't shared this with you, but the way that we start each episode is through this acronym that Matt shared with me. It's called MEPS. So this just allows us to check in with each other, right? So how are you doing mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually? So usually correspond one word to each letter. So if it helps, I could go first to show you how I do it, unless
Yeah,
you'd like to
great.
go.
Go ahead. Do that. Yeah, that'd be great. Well, go ahead.
Sure. So, mentally, I'm feeling focused today. I feel like I'm back in class and want to impress my favorite professor, which is crucial, by the way, listener. If you have a professor that you like, you'll instantly do better. At least that was the case for me. I'd like to think. Um,
So,
let's see. Emotionally, I'm feeling calm. Physically, I'm feeling a little bit tired. I've been running a lot recently, so body's feeling a little bit sore. And spiritually, I'm feeling grateful that I get to continue this dialogue with my favorite professor. So, um, no, this isn't a test, just whatever comes to mind. Feel
yeah,
free
that's good.
to
I like
share.
it. It's also something that's unique. I know I said this in your class, and I say it all the time with in regards to mental health with men, especially young men, older men, whatever. We tend to kind of like just suck stuff up and not talk about it. So it's good to have a check. And when you have friends where you can do this with, I'd encourage anybody to do this with your guy friends because guys don't like to talk about stuff like this. So this is great to do it. Um,
100%.
yeah, to be authentic is important. And so I say mentally, um, I'm a little jumbled today. Had a lot of things going on before we jumped on the call, and Will thankfully let me slam down a little food before we got going, so I'd have a little energy. Um, see, physically, I'm in that little bit of a tired bucket too. It's just been a lot going on lately, and as you age, it's weird. You don't tend to sleep as well. It's a weird occurrence. Like when you're younger, you're like, I'm going to suck up every minute of the day. And you don't really want to go to bed. Or you can sleep 5 hours, but as you get older, all of a sudden it's like this paradox of I can't sleep as much as I wanted to. So that can be a little challenging. But overall, really well. I've lost a lot of weight this last year, and so from that big picture perspective, doing well. Um,
Good.
so that's meant. Oh, I missed emotionally. I went with the physical. So emotional. Um, I'd say anticipatory. Maybe that's the emotion. Like I'm anticipating a lot of great from this conversation and from some other things that are going on in my personal life and professional life. Life is never. This will probably come up later. Like it's like a roller coaster sometimes, but it's not. I used to think when I was closer to your age that life was like this trajectory just went up and up and up, and it's just not the reality of how life is, and that's okay. That's totally okay, right? So
Yeah.
there's that part of it. And then spiritually, I think just feeling like a little bit like you, grateful and very blessed that you reached out to me earlier today. Even got an email from a recent a person who had my undergrad class, and she said she's at her internship and she's really using everything she learned in class and she's talking about it in meetings and it's helping her tremendously. And it makes me feel like there's a purpose to what I'm doing, and in the changing career that I had has really paid off for me, but really importantly for those folks that I've interacted with at Rollins. And it's always had a special place in my heart. So blessed, encouraged, I guess is how I would say spiritual.
Yeah. I love that. That's got to be one of the best feelings in the world when a former student reaches out to you like I did, not to sound egotistical, but it just must make you feel so good.
Yeah,
I mean, I love
it
that.
does. It does. And sometimes there's one guy that, if you don't mind me going off on a little story here real quick, because
Oh,
it's
it's
related
okay.
to what we'll talk about. Like I've had, I had a guy one time that I set him up with an interview for a sales job and he didn't really dress professionally and it didn't go that well. And then he applied for another job and I helped him with his interviewing, his resume, and it didn't work out. And then I kind of lost touch with him. And this is probably 3 years ago. And then maybe 6 months ago, I get a text from this guy. And he's like, Professor, I just want to tell you, I was thinking about you. He goes, I know you love cars. I just want to tell you, I'm working for BMW now, and I am really loving this. I'm using a lot of the things I learned in your class, and I've gotten a promotion. I'm now in charge of the finance department at the dealer. And he didn't know this, but I have two BMWs. I have a new one, and I have an old antique 1972 BMW. And so I sent him pictures of the cars, and it was just one of those where I didn't know where he had ended up, and his thoughtfulness of just reaching out after several years had gone by to say something means a lot. So for your listeners that are currently students, or that are in college, or you're a young person getting into business, if somebody helps you or someone makes an impact on you, you might assume they know it, but don't assume. Like say what you mean to say. Like put it out there. Like go ahead and say those things you want to say to somebody, whether it's a text or whatever. It doesn't take long, but it can really, you don't know where that person is in their life and their journey, and a lot of times it can make a big difference.
Right. And just as you said earlier, guys don't really talk about that. I mean, women are wonderful too, but guys don't really talk about this topic too much because we just assume that we're all doing fine. But if you just give other people the
Yeah.
opportunity to be heard and to listen to them, you might find out things about them that they weren't necessarily willing to share, but it was so important that they said something. So,
Yeah, Will, it's one of the things I like most about you. There's lots of things, but like when you talk to somebody like those kind of topics, and you get below like just the sports conversation and the weather and what's going on in politics, and you get into some personal things like those kind of people that can reflect on that. Your life is enriched by them, and they're the kind of friends that like if you call them at midnight and you're stuck on the side of the road 5 hours away, they're going to drive and come get you because they're authentic individuals. So finding those people in your life that are like-minded. It's okay if somebody's not, and you hope and pray that maybe they'll open up to live a more full life, because there's a path in life that like we all get options and choices, right? And sometimes the world tells us like we could do anything you want, like that's all, your world's your oyster and you can do that. And yeah, that's kind of true. But if I wanted to play in the NBA, I'm not going to play in the NBA. I'm 5'10". I barely can jump. I've got a ruptured Achilles tendon. Like I'm not going to be great in the NBA. But what I can be is really good at what I'm doing, and I can find purpose in what I'm doing. And when I do that, I am impacting others all around me. And then that has a ripple effect, which is I think part of why we're talking. So, and I didn't mean to
Yeah.
get sidetracked, but that hopefully that's
No, no, it's all good. And you know, when I was a student with you, better part of a year and a half ago, I remember asking you a little bit about your time at Colgate and your transition into becoming a professor, arguably the best one at Crummer at Rollins. But if you wouldn't reminding me and the listener, I am curious just why exactly you decided to leave the corporate realm with Colgate and move into academia. Was it because you thought you could make a broader impact on the future generation, if you will? Or what did that really look like for you? I'm just
yeah,
curious.
for sure. That's a good question. It's a very different set of circumstances. I've been at Colgate 26 years when I decided to, I use air quotes, retire because I was way too young to retire. But
Yeah.
when you work at a giant corporation, which there's a guy named Professor Galloway that I watch a lot of his things, and he talks about the American corporation is one of the greatest wealth building tools in the history of the world. Like you could take someone like me whose parents didn't go to college. I was a first generation student, didn't come from a lot of means, very lower middle class upbringing. And you go to work for a giant company, you get amazing benefits and ways to fund your life and become wealthy and really build a future for yourself. And I had done that there. And then when I got to the point at this period in time, there was a restructuring and there was a job that I could have taken that was very similar to what I was doing. They were going to interview me for it, and I was flagged for that. But the offer came to take this retirement package and give me a lot of the benefits as if I was a lot older than I was at the time, compensation wise, benefits, things like that. And the job opening came up at Rollins in the undergraduate department. And I knew it wasn't going to pay very much, but and this will go back to some of the themes we'll talk about. Over the years at Colgate, I was a teacher, if you will, or a professor in our own curriculum. We had our own learning development, like a lot of large corporations do. And I taught classes on coaching and feedback, leadership. And I always enjoyed that adult learning environment. You know, I knew I didn't want to go back if I left Colgate at some point and go teach elementary school. Not that there was anything wrong with it, but it just wasn't for me. But the adult learning of people like rewiring their brain and like the neuroplasticity, the things they would be seeing that they had maybe built up bad habits, and now they're going to change and implement something like very practical learning was great. And so I thought this would be a great chance to go try it at Rollins. And because I'd gone to Rollins for my graduate degree, 20 years prior, I was like, this will be a great chance to get back to a school that I really love a lot too. And it really, as you know, maybe some of your listeners don't, it's a very prestigious college, liberal arts college, really founded it here in Winter Park, Florida, 1880s, like just very, very solid education from undergrad to graduate programs. And so being part of that was a big blessing to me. So that's kind of how it started. And I will say though, too, just like for those that are out there thinking about making transitions in your career, you can I did a lot of thinking about it, and I did a Ben Franklin thing where I put like, here's the benefits of this, here's the things that maybe aren't, that'll be more tricky. No matter what you do, when you make a change like that, it's a huge shift. And I don't know that I said it in your class, but I tell the undergrad students a lot, like I'll joke, we'll talk about career planning, and I'll go, well, basically, guys, students, I'm a lot like you. I had to start all over again. They're like, no, you didn't. Like, I had all this knowledge, and that I go, but yeah, when you change careers like I did, and a lot of folks do, when you go from a corporate world where I knew people. I mean, Colgate's in I don't know anymore, 170 countries around the world. I knew people from all over the world there. They knew me. I had a reputation. And then I jumped to the small pond at Rollins where there's a very specific audience. I had to start building a reputation all over again. It's like starting all over. And
Right.
that was unexpected because I should have realized that as an adult, but it wasn't aware to me. So that's one of the, I wouldn't say a pitfall, but a challenge to that of knowing it's going to take you some time to go from starting off fresh and like understanding the environment and the culture and all the things like that. And it's paid off. It'll be 5 years in January that I started, and it's been exceptionally rewarding. So that's a little background of why I decided to make the switch.
Yeah, no, that's a wonderful answer. I'm sure there were moments during that growth period, and maybe it's still ongoing, but 5 years you were like, oh man, Colgate was really great. This is hard. Even though you weren't getting, say, compensated as well as you were at Colgate, you just
Right.
continued on because you felt like it was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And I'm certainly a fan of that. And many of my former classmates and you know, students at Cromer today, Rollins are still benefiting from that choice. So
Agreed.
that's
Yeah. It's a lot. It's challenging when you have. I don't know if I could phrase it the right way, but like if you're used to a certain expectation and then you start over again, it's It's a lot. I had a guest speaker this last semester that for the first time that has a book he wrote about career planning. And he used this analogy of like when, even for college students that may have some listeners out there, when you come out of college, like you've been in this closed environment where you learned all this, you've learned like academic theory and application, you're at the top of the mountain. And then you get your first job and boom, you drop like a stone and you're down at the bottom and you're doing like really basic work in the beginning. And you're like, God, what am I doing? This is not stuff. I learned about like physics and sciences. And I learned about how to do statistical analysis on spreadsheets, and I did presentations in front of 50 people, and I worked in consulting, and like now I'm doing like grunt work. It seems like there's a huge letdown there. But the reality is like you've got to be a little bit in the grind every day to like prove yourself, and whether it's your own business or and you're trying to get new clients or you're in a large company, you got to do kind of what I just described. You got to start making a name for yourself. And one of your former peers, Sarah, I don't know if it was the semester I had you or not, but she came back into class and talked about how she had graduated, went to work at a tech company in sales, and she had her MBA. And like a lot of MBA students think, well, I'm going to get my MBA and it'll punch my ticket to make a six-figure salary. And she realized pretty quickly, like, no, not necessarily right away. I got to still prove that I can do the current job that I'm in now, this entry level type job. But because I already have my MBA, when the opportunity arises and I have performance matched up with my education, now I get to accelerate my career faster. So it's a good observation for anybody who's out there, especially in today's job market, because a lot of your peers and folks that have come after you a couple years back when you were graduating, I think jobs were a little more plentiful, but you know, because you've been in the mix. Some of the more recent grads are like, man, it's not as easy to get a job as it was a couple years ago.
Yeah, definitely. And it's funny, I'm happy to hear that Sarah came and spoke. That's actually on this list of goals I have. One day I'd like to come in and say a few words to a group of students at Crummer. If I feel confident and reputable enough to do that, if you will. But I'm so glad you're bringing this up
Absolutely.
because today and every day you're focused on getting students started in terms of their career trajectory. But now in reference to people like Sarah or people like Zane or just our peers that graduated with me, a year and a half ago or so, I've been speaking to some of these classmates, these friends of mine, and it seems to me they've realized, maybe like Sarah has, that they took the job they initially did because they thought that the ceiling was exactly what they wanted, like six figure, multiple six figure if possible. But what they've come to realize is, wait a second, I chose this job because of the dollar signs. I didn't actually choose the job because it's what I want to do. And I'm hearing that some people are leaving those jobs in pursuit of something that they will actually find more meaningful and more purposeful for what they want their life to be all about. It's just funny. I was talking to a friend of mine about exactly this, who plans to leave his job shortly. But and in a previous episode, Matt and I were talking about this idea of changing careers. I mean, if luckily I'm extremely blessed. I don't have any intention of leaving what I'm doing now, but if I were to, do you have any ideas to as to just maybe a couple tips as to how somebody could navigate that, much like you did in terms of leaving Colgate and going to Rollins?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I one of the things that's most fascinating about working with students and Gen Z and the upcoming Gen A and even young millennials sometimes in classes is like you guys have a very different philosophy about work and life and the balance,
Right.
right? Like that's the analogy, and it makes you laugh a little bit because there's a stereotype that goes along with that from people that are I'm a solid Gen Xer, but if you're an older millennial or you're a boomer even beyond, like you're
Kids
all
don't want to work today.
kids don't want to work. Kids are lazy. But whenever I talk to people in my age group that say that, I go, you know what? I understand why you could think that, but you're wrong. And I'm going to tell you why you're wrong because what I've experienced, it was an unexpected silver lining to this job, is it's been intergenerational learning, which is not just the idea that I stand up in front of a class and I tell you things or a guest speaker comes in and you read a book, but like I learned from you guys. And the thing that on the career aspect of it, I think your generation, there could be a lot of societal factors around this, but you don't look at a job as like, I'm going to do whatever my boss says. And you want to know, like, is there some value in what I'm doing? Do you see me as a human being, as a valuable part of a team? because what people will say to me sometimes, like, oh, these kids are despicable, they'll go somewhere else. And I go, is it really the kid, the young person, or is it the way you're leading and managing them that's causing them to leave? Because my experience has been with students, if you know that somebody cares about you and they have your best interest in mind, you'll go to the wall for them. You'll push the limits. You'll work 60 hours a week, no problem. Like, you'll put the effort in because you know there's a mission, there's a vision. They support you, they're coaching you, you're taking the feedback and you're using it. And that's what I think is different. Like, when I got out of college and got my first job, I needed a paycheck and I just did my job. And if my boss had said, hey, I need you to go polish my shoes and run errands for me, I would have been like, yes, sir, no matter what, I'll just do whatever you tell me. Like, so that's not a great attitude either, because I probably got taken advantage of, like in my very first job that I had, where I had a terrible boss. And, like, thankfully, I landed in a place where I was in a culture where it really valued people. And so, from having been in the class, like, I really talk about that a lot with all students, but finding a place that you fit with culturally. And the second point, that was point number one. Two is, you might not, that first job out of college, don't think that's your end ticket. Like, because you might get a job and on the surface it looks like the thing you want to do, and it's the money's there, and you could find out that's not really how it is. Like, maybe they sold you a bill of goods, if you will, when you were going in there. You didn't really get a full view of the culture and the climate. Um, and thirdly, like, if you are going to make an exit, have a plan. Like, have a plan of what you're going to do. And I've had some students that have approached me that have done an interesting thing, which I think is very typical of your generation. Like, they have a personal interest in something they really want to pursue, whether it's sports or anything, like coaching sports, youth sports, let's say. And they want a job that they could get a full-time job to pay the bills while they're trying to build up their own business and coaching sports. So they'll find something like that that allows them to have some balance where they can just go to work. Now, they're not going to make huge amounts of money. They're not going to do, but what they really enjoy is the sports thing. So they have what we used to call your vocation and your avocation, and they have a strategy where they're trying to, like, build the avocation, their hobby, into something that's a full-time job. And the students, I've had a couple that have approached me like that with that idea, have done really well, and they've had a plan of how they want to go about it. Does it always go perfectly? No, but they're progressing toward it. So I think, and last point I'll make is, like, I think in any job you take, I still think you should give it a year to see what can happen, because for students that will do that, sometimes that is one thing, is because there's this, we're all into it because we all have our phones and we look at Instagram all the time. There's this instant gratification thing. And if you give a job a year and you really suss out, like, am I going to get supported or not? And then you decide to leave, you put on your resume and you have to explain it to your next job interview. You can explain that it wasn't a good fit, but you put a year in. But if you change jobs every 4 to 6 months and you keep hopping around, that's not going to look that good for you. And I think it's not really doing justice in the transactional relationship that is employment. Like, a company is offering you something in exchange for your time, energy, your thinking, your brain power. So you want to give it a fair shot. So those are a few things I would say about that.
Right. Thank you so much. I sincerely value your takes on this topic. But related to this career trajectory, do you think more students would feel valued and fulfilled in their first jobs if, say, their manager or the owner of the business they work for were to come and ask for their opinion more often? Do you think that's one step that those people could take?
Yeah, I think so. And I think you can also, I would encourage them to go and ask for that. Like, when I taught coaching and feedback classes, and this is a little bit of that coaching and feedback conversation. Like, it's incumbent upon the coachee, the person receiving the coaching, to not just, like, wait for it, but go and ask for it. And not just ask for it, like, come feed me, feed me, feed me, like a little kid, but, like, go in there with the attitude, like, hey boss, here's a couple options I've got. What do you think about this? And then have dialogue with your boss. If you're not getting what you need, approach it professionally and maturely and say, hey boss, like, the last couple times I was doing these projects, I was looking for some help, and I think I could have added value on this. And if the boss comes back and says, well, here's why I didn't involve you in this discussion or this decision, and it's a certifiably or reasonably valid thing, like, maybe you just don't have enough experience yet, because you're, a lot of times bosses have knowledge you don't have as a lower level person. And even when I was at Colgate, my manager would have a view of something that was coming down the road that she couldn't share with me. So I would have it, like, why can't we just do this? And she'd say, I can't tell you why, but I that's not going to work this way because we thought about that. And in that scenario, like, I trusted her to know that she was telling me the truth, and I had been down enough roads with her where we kind of had some skin in the game together, and we rubbed knuckles a little bit, and kind of we had been through things. So that's where a boss needs to establish it, and especially I think with Gen Z, your generation, like to know that the boss is on your side. And I still feel like if you go to someone who's a reasonable person, which I think is, I don't know, 90% of people that are out there, and you ask for what you want and you do it in a professional, polite way, asking for help, I think most people are going to want to do that. So for the person who's stuck in that and they're like, yeah, I feel like my boss is just like blowing by me, doesn't ask my opinion, have a chat about it,
Yeah.
and see what comes out of it. And then that might be telling for you if you don't get if they promise you one thing and don't deliver. There's that old saying about if somebody shows you who they are, believe them. Like if you see what someone's character is like and what they're about, I don't mean like shun them forever and be a jerk, but just realize this idea of boundaries, which I wish I would have learned a long time ago in my life as I learned as an adult. Like that person can no longer be part of a life that's consistent with what I'm doing. So they're still nice and I'll still say hello to them when I see them. I'm not going to be a jerk and talk trash on social media about them, but I just won't, they're not be part of my mainstream anymore. I'm not going to allow them to pour into my life and provide input into my life because it's not helpful. So
100%. Yeah, and that's just a matter of respect, not only for
yeah,
them, but mainly for you too, because your
yeah,
time is incredibly valuable. It's our most crucial asset,
right,
everybody, you know?
yeah, right.
Um, I do think I wish that more managers realized what you said early on, and that when you, let's say you're an owner of a business that does quite well, and you bring on a fresh analyst, and they're fresh out of college. I do wish that more owners realize that they can learn a ton from that individual, just like that new analyst is going to learn from them, because it's mutually beneficial, right? And when that new employee understands that they have an opportunity to teach that owner something, I think that's where you feel valuable, and that's when you're going to be willing to work 60 hours, you know what I mean? So,
Yeah, yeah, because the boss sees you for who you are, and it's not this command and control sort of military structure of like I'm the captain, you're the private, I'm going to tell you what to do, you're just going to go do it blindly. Like that's a little bit more like what I grew up with in my generation of like command and control structure that was there from prior generations to me. The idea that you can then receive feedback, and it's really like I guess in the academic terms you'd call it like transformational leadership, like a leader or manager. Because I like the word leader better, right? We all like that word better, but
yeah, it's a good word.
to throw, yeah, but it's easy to throw the word leader around, and we could spend a whole, we probably have spent podcasts just talking about what's leadership about, but the principle behind it is that you care about your other the human beings around you enough that you prioritize, um, and even in a spiritual sense, like you prioritize respecting and caring, and if you want to use the word love in the classic sense, and I mean that not in the way we use love now, but in the way the Greeks or the Romans did in the words they used about this brotherly love, the all encompassing, the kindness that you can show people. We're both Rollins alums, and I've got sitting here in front of me my Mr. Rogers greeting cards that I picked up recently that have like I give a hoot for you and some of the things that special.
That's so
And his
cool.
his whole thing is like his whole main idea, which we talk about at Rollins a lot, is expressing kindness. Like
Right.
you can always choose to be kind, and that takes a lot of different manifestations, and it can happen in the workplace, and it should, because people will want to work for you more. To me it doesn't ever make any sense why a manager wouldn't like, I'm paying you and I sourced you out and I interviewed dozens of people and I decided on you, but now I'm going to treat you like you're a second class citizen. I just don't, it doesn't make any sense to me. So
The
for
listeners
those
have
managers out there, they're in my generation, listen up. Yeah,
for sure. Listener Professor Kroll, please. He's taught me a lot, and I'm better for it.
yeah, right.
Most definitely. That's wonderful. And sorry, I cut you off there. I think our Wi-Fi cut out for a second there. But I want to, before I chat a little bit more about students with you, I want to share something I don't believe I ever have. And the listeners have heard this before, but one of my favorite
Okay.
quotes my dad told me all the time growing up was, "People don't care what you know until they know you care." And this quote was evident throughout my time as your student, because I vividly remember a presentation I gave on some company. I should remember which one. Um, uh, I don't. That's okay. but I spent more time than
That's
probably
right.
two other presentations combined for the sole reason that I wanted to do a good job for you. Just because of how much you empowered me thinking that I was smart enough to do a nice job for you. No other professor made me feel that way. I remember my roommate coming into my room saying, "You're still working on that?" And I was like, "Yes." This Professor Kroll is going to hear this. This is important. And maybe I should have spent a little more time on another presentation, but it didn't matter. That professor didn't care much about me as you did. So thanks for that. So
No,
yeah,
no, I'm glad, and I think that that's the analogy of um, I don't know, like what a boss could do in the workplace for somebody. I just don't why that doesn't happen more often, and maybe it does. We just don't hear about it as much because we hear about all the negative things typically that go on in a workplace. But I'm flattered to hear you say that, and I also hope that happens to other folks. I know it does because I've had other people tell me that they value the kind of feedback I would give them, the kind of the quality of work you want to do because it's just a it's just like when you have a parent or a mentor or a friend that really supports you. Like you want to give them the best, and I mean at a core principle for all of us as human beings who value other people, like we always want to give our best in whatever we're doing. But there's different kinds of best. There's some days you just don't feel like giving your best, and you still want to do it, or it may be a lot harder to give your best. For
yeah,
some professors that maybe, and sometimes one of my things being in sales was there was a couple of times where I had potential clients that were just really, the best word is nasty. They were just mean. They were not easy to deal with. And I took it on like a personal challenge. Like, I am going to win this person over. I'm going to bring donuts in here. I'm going to do whatever it takes to see if I can win this person over because I know it's not me because I didn't do anything to them. It's something else is going on. And the truth of it is, like, I'm going to say just I've never done an analysis of this. 99% of the time, when someone's rude to you or cuts you off or doesn't, it's just nasty. It, it almost is never about you. It's about some other thing. It's about an argument they had. It's about finding out their parent has Alzheimer's. It's about finding their kids and failing out of school. Like they had an argument with their spouse or significant other. And so like, how do you then take that and keep that in mind? And believe you me, I'm no expert at it because I have my own times when I get frustrated and I do things or I get mad in traffic or just frustrated with lots of life that we all do. But it's refreshing to have conversations like this because it centers you back on what really matters.
yeah, yeah. No, I love that. And it's weird. I don't see you as the type to get mad, but I know you do because you're human, and as do I. But that's that's funny. But I
Yeah,
mean,
that's exactly. Yeah, yeah. It's a reality. I know it's probably shocking, but if you talk to my wife or something, she could tell you about times when I do get frustrated or angry, and sometimes it's never because I'm not God. It's not always. I like to say that it's always righteous anger, but it's not. A lot of times it's selfish anger. You just do things because you're like a little kid. I'm not getting what
yeah,
I want. Doggone it, So,
yeah,
but part of well, the other thing is like we all have what I've learned in my adult life that I didn't learn younger. And some of your listeners maybe have learned this from their family of origin, but like very few people are all good or all bad. We have this blending of things about us that even on our best day, we know we don't live up to our own expectations, much less anybody else's. And the challenge of that, like, is living in that tension and being okay with it. That there's things about me that I know I need to work on and things that I know I'm good at. And I don't brag about those things, but I can operate in that space. And when I do something that I'm not proud of, I can make an apology. I can mend defenses. I can what psychologists call rupture and repair. Like I can have a rupture. If you and I had an argument, we could then find a way to repair that. And I'm identifying that I made a mistake and we talk about it. That's really like the secret sauce, I think, of like knowing how to navigate through people. Because when people hold grudges, I mean, we know from research, like when somebody holds a grudge or a vendetta against somebody, the person that did some harm to them in the past, and it could have been a long time ago, they've forgotten about it. But you have, man, you're holding, and it's damaging you. Like it's damaging here, your physical body is being affected by it. And so there's a lot to learn, a lot to explore in that space too when it comes to living your life.
yeah. I think holding a grudge takes too much effort for having such a negative impact on one's life. I try to hold as little grudges as possible.
Yeah, I would have pinned that for you for sure too, because you sort of seem like that you roll with the punches pretty easily, even in some scenarios that I know you and I have talked about in the past where you were entitled or you were in the right and someone else was wrong to you, and how you react to that's really different. So, it's why I think you have the reputation you have among your peers and friends and people you meet of being such a great guy who's got a lot of integrity.
I appreciate that. And, I boil it down to this level of bandwidth we all have. Like when you wake up in the morning, you have a certain amount and that dwindles throughout the day. And so I try to make, just recently coming into this corporate realm, I try to make it as many big decisions or important decisions as I can early in the morning because I know I won't be as confident in the afternoon or the evening.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's kind of how I go about that. And two, another thing that you and the listeners might find valuable is, when it comes to dealing with say difficult people or difficult situations in the evening, I'll do everything I can to not make a decision in that evening. And I also try not to respond to anybody if I'm in a bad mood or angry because I don't want my mood to, you know, create sort of this negative wave of an impact on them because this is just a me problem that has nothing to do
Yeah,
with them, and I wouldn't want it to come off as that way, if that makes sense.
yeah. Oh, 100% makes sense. Yeah, it's really easy to do that and sort of dovetail. But it is like the theme of your podcast is all of those the silent stories that are going on, the things in the silent service, that the things you do when no one's watching, and the small habits you build up, and they do make a big difference when you're dealing in this realm. So that's great.
Yeah, and it also we talked about faith just a little bit earlier. Are you religious by chance? I was just curious.
Yeah, I would identify myself as a Christian, somebody who's practiced faith and understands from my worldview would be based on the principles of Christianity. I think I said to you earlier, like there's a lot of like choices we face and decisions we have where there's one choice that's okay and there's other choices, and I've just examined other things and found Christianity to be a course of action and a course of living that is a very solid, good choice, and I'm mean that in a very practical way, not to include all the spiritual reasons why too, because there's lots of good, valid reasons, and lots of folks have written books and done, PhDs on like why faith makes sense and what it does in your life. But it
Yeah,
has been a definite foundation in my life for sure. And you mature that that there's a principle in faith called sanctification where you're constantly, and it's a big theological word, but it's the idea that you're always moving towards a destination where one day, at least in Christian worldview, like you are with God in heaven one day, and then you're perfected. And but you're not there on the earth. And when you start thinking that you've made it, you're there and you're better, then that's when you're set up for a big fall. Usually, that's when pride jumps in.
yeah, yeah. I'm glad you're a Christian, as am I. And the reason I ask is because I equate somehow, maybe not, maybe it doesn't make sense to most, but I equate Christianity, religion to sales in a way because, of course, my sales career didn't last nearly as long as yours did. It turned out it wasn't necessarily for me. And what I didn't share with you, Professor Kroll, is that I wasn't having a good time. It took a major mental toll on me doing the B2B, the high ticket sales. And so
Yeah,
I ended up saying I'm sorry to my employer in that, it's just not the right fit and I'm sorry I let you down. And I took full ownership, and the beauty is that I was told that they'd be happy to find another opportunity for me within the same company. And I was like, that is insane. And certainly, I don't mean to sound self-absorbed, but I think that attributes to just being or doing your best to be a kind person. Maybe. I mean, if you
yeah,
treat somebody well, if you treat other people well, regardless of how well you perform, maybe they'll want to go out of their way and try to help you out. So
yeah. Right, yeah, right. And I think that's that's this. You can. I'd like to hear you expand on why the analogy between Christianity and sales, because I think there is. I'll give you my 2 cents and we'll chime in. But
yeah,
there's a thing about looking out for putting the needs of others above yourself. And so for someone in modern B2B sales, and I don't want to take this too far, but like you're you're other focused. Where you're a good salesperson is like thinking about what are the needs of my client. And salespeople have the exact opposite of that reputation usually, which is like I'm going to try to get whatever I can get so I can make some money off somebody.
right.
And certain stereotypes, car salesmen, realtors, things like that. But the reality is, if you're really bringing a product or service that has value to somebody and you are able to communicate that value and it's not the right fit for a client, then having them say no is not a bad thing because it's not the right deal for them. And if you are really looking out for their best interests and you're acting as a consultant, as an ally, and you're bringing them an product or opportunity that would benefit their life, even if they don't really know that just yet, that's that could be a spiritual thing. Like you're doing something because it's out of the genuine concern you have for helping others. And so it's a bit of a stretch, but yes, there is a correlation between why a good salesperson could do it and why I think some of the better salespeople that are gurus over the years come from a faith background where that's their focus is thinking about how can I serve and help other people.
Right. I think of sales as almost like a dance, and when the best salespeople that I've come across care more about the individual client than the client cares about themselves.
Yeah.
And when you truly help somebody figure out whether that product or that service is what's best for them or not, like you f find out which avenue is best, you win every single time.
Yeah.
And I think that realization, is quite powerful. And it seems like you've begun to well, you have been pondering, but this idea of starting a sales program at Rollins, I was just wondering if there's any kind of an update on that because I will go out and tell all of my extended family and cousins in Boston to come on down and enroll at Rollins so
Go on,
they can be
roll
taught
it.
by you.
That's awesome. Good. Yeah. We need more Massachusetts people to run.
We got
Come
so
on down from
we got
Massachusetts to
so
Raleigh.
many.
Um, we have a lot. And that's sort of the tradition there. No, I'm glad you asked about that. So it's been, it'll be 5 years in January, and we're still working on things. But what's been cool is for the first time ever, I'm have an opportunity to have students compete in a national sales competition where there's actually prize money on the line. We have a corporate sponsor in Fastenal. I guess I could say that on the podcast. Who's sponsoring a thing where the students can do. They're going to send people to campus to help us with the program, and then also do some virtual components. So I'm in the process of putting together a few students to try this competition out and see how we do, and
That's
having a
so cool. Oh
it's going
my
to be
gosh.
fun. There's money involved for them if they win, and so kudos to Fastenal who's come up with a way to do a program that comes to the campus. Versus usually when you do a sales competition with a team of students, they have to go to FSU or up to New Hampshire or Vermont or out west to California. But this one they actually come to you, so it makes it much more easy to do without a big budget. And so that's been super helpful. And there are more and more students, and I've even talked to several alums about creating like maybe first thing we'll do is create an alumni network. And the more we place students in sales jobs, and I think this last semester I had in my undergrad class, which is where it helps the most, like probably 5 or 6 people. I'm just thinking of names off the top of my head where they came back and spoke to current students. And these are mostly people that have been out this for a year or two. The one I think of the most often is Jenny Romanenko, who was a little before your time because she was in my very first class I ever taught.
Did she
And
did she work at Gartner?
she works at Oracle. Yeah,
Oracle, okay.
yeah, she's at Oracle, and she is a she's from Ukraine originally. Went to Rollins, graduated, moved to Boston, took a job with Oracle, and she's just been really having a phenomenal career there. And she has been one of the most dedicated alums. She comes back every semester, whether it's in person or virtual, and talks to students about that transition from college to career. The fact that that you do learn a lot being a student at Rollins, the whole liberal arts idea that we have in the foundation puts you ahead of other people because you have a better worldview, you have a better way to do research, you have that's a different way of thinking that other students that go to bigger universities do, so the value comes through. And she's proven that. I think she's on her second or third round of promotions at Oracle. And
Whoa.
but yeah, I know. What I respect her about most about her is that she's actually helped one, two, three, at least 3 Rollins alums get jobs at Oracle and then move into other tech industry jobs. And she continues to come back and show up and be there on campus. And she was here in May and she was here in person. Um, she just became a U.S. citizen, which is a cool thing. And I was thrilled for her
Oh,
to become a U.S. citizen recently. And
me
she has
too.
been just so reliable. And I tell her, just like you're doing with this podcast and other things, I think, giving to the Alumni Association financially is always good, but doing things that pour into other people that are currently there. I wish when I was coming out of UCF that I'd had somebody who could have been a mentor to me and like help guide me in my career. Thankfully, I was blessed and fortunate enough to find a way in my career, but that's another motivation for me to keep doing it and to encourage other people that are in your situation. You've been out for a couple of years. It means a lot when you reach back out to folks that are where you were sitting in a classroom and like, oh my gosh, I'm about to hit the wall. And it happens every May. It just happened this year again in the spring too. People are like, they come in January and they're like, oh, I'm good. I'm going to cruise out of here a few months. I'm going to enjoy. And then comes April, May, they're like, oh my gosh, I got to get a job. I got to find something to do. My parents are going to kill me. I got to get a job. And yes, you need to get a job,
Right.
but like
Probably a good idea.
a little forethought. Yeah, probably a good idea to get a job once you graduate. But also don't put so much pressure on yourself that as a young person that you've got to like figure your life out. I mean, a lot of us, I always think back, and I may have the dates wrong on this, but I think Ray Kroc, the guy that founded McDonald's, was like in his 50s before he started a successful business. There's lots of stories like that out there. And for listeners, if I'm wrong on the dates, forgive me, but there's lots of stories of people who started business late in their life and didn't find a career path. And in some ways, I feel like that's happened for me in what I've found because I found such rewards. And I've off camera over here, I'm sitting in my little office at home and I've got a stack of cards and notes. And I even keep a file of emails and I call my rainy day folder where it's things people like you have sent me, just saying thank you or telling me where they're at. And if I ever get down a little bit, I can go pull those out and read them and they're super valuable. And so I recommend that to anybody. I learned it from my old boss years ago. Like, keep this rainy day folder, whether it's on hard copies or it's somewhere in a folder in your Outlook or your Gmail of like things that were really like moments when people saw you for who you are, or moments where you had success. Because then when you're having a bad day, and we all do, you can go back and flip through that and go, oh yeah, that's where I need to keep my mind, put my mind back in that space.
Well, Professor Kroll, I'm still saying the doctor. For the listener, for the
That's
longest
fine.
time, I called Professor Kroll Dr. Kroll, but he'd rather me call him Professor Kroll. So,
Yeah.
my mistake.
No, you're good. You're good, Will.
I so desperately wanted to add to your rainy day folder when I was graduating from Crummer, and I'll never forget. I did just say I'm quite good at not holding grudges, but I have been holding on to this one a little bit. I went to the some office at Crummer and I said, I have a letter here to my favorite professor, and I'd like to send it to his home address. I don't want him to read this in an email. I want him to know that I handwritten wrote him this note. And the person wouldn't give me the address. So I want to see if I can find that letter and send it to you because it's yours, rightfully so, and it
Yes,
deserves
and
to
I'll
be
text you
read.
by address. Also, the other thing, yeah, I'll text you by address, so you'll have my address. And I'm officially at Crummer now in this new role that I'm doing, so you could mail the letter there. I would actually get it there too. Now, I think I have that,
Okay.
so
Okay, I'm gonna make a note of that. And
that's perfect.
one thing I'm just wrapping up here,
Yeah,
Professor Cole, I did want to ask or let you know too, since finishing up at Crummer, I've become an avid reader. I read everything. I just love it. I think that reading is this cheat code that I have at my disposal to learn from the greats, if you will. I can pay $20 to read a book of somebody's entire life that's incredibly successful. I just read the 38 letters that John D. Rockefeller wrote to his son. Crazy
oh, cool.
cool. Um, so not to put you on the spot here, but I was just wondering for the listeners and for myself, if there's one book that's top of mind that you think everybody should read. And I should have asked you this at school, but I didn't. So better late than never.
Good question. I'm just looking over here in my stack. I've got a stack of them that are off the side. There's one that I was when I saw your some of the questions and the things we were going to talk about. There's one called actually it's right here. Grab it off camera for a second. Um, this book called Strengths Based Leadership, and the takeoff from this is, and I guess I'm targeting this mostly towards younger people when I
Okay.
say this about this book. Don Clifton, it's now called Clifton Strengths. It's part of the Gallup organization. The elevator pitch on this is that he was the president of the Gallup organization, major polling thing, and he started realizing that a lot of the people that were very successful there in his organization had certain traits or characteristics about them that made them successful. So they created this. You can go online, buy the book. You can go online, Strengths Finder. I think it's on 2.0 or 3.0 now. And what it does basically is it teaches you the idea, which I didn't learn till later in life, that if you focus in on the strengths of the things you're really good at, you can really excel and you'll be happier and you'll feel more in your groove. And because typically happens, and I don't know, I wasn't in school like when you were growing up, but when I was in school, you were pretty much told like you need to get good grades. Your parents told you, teachers expect you to get good grades in math, science, history, English, writing. all the things. And the reality is that we're all wired a little bit different. So some things come naturally better. And that's the point of this book. So I've recommended this to students sometimes where they're getting close, they're in their junior year, coming in senior year, like, I don't really know like what I'm good at. Like, I don't really know like what are my things. And so this is a very practical book where you could read it and then you can do this online test where it kind of gives you a little more direction. I'm not saying it's like it's going to spit out something and go, you should be a lawyer or you should go into sales or whatever. But it gives you direction in terms of like the things that you'll be naturally good at. And when you can do things, and I don't know if you've had this experience, but when you get into something where it just clicks for you and you're like, wow, this is really, and you will, if you haven't had this yet, you will get to this. Like when you find
Ooh,
something, you're like, man, this is, it's going well. And I can't believe how easy this seems to me. Other people find it hard. For me, like the sales piece is, well, I'll give you a quick story. I remember I had a friend years ago that was like, I just met this guy and he's like, and I told him about my job and he goes, so you're telling me you walk into dentist offices like 6, 7 times a day. You don't know anybody in, no, don't know anybody in there. I said, I will know them, but I don't know them at first. And you tell them about Colgate products and you talk to them. And I'm like, yeah, that's, I do that. My team does that. He's like, oh, I could never do that. That was such a weird thing to me because I was like, of course, that's what people like. I like people. I'm interacting. I'm just go in there. I don't, but for some folks, like it doesn't come naturally. And I guess my point is this book can help somebody who's struggling with like, I don't know what I want to do. I'm not sure what I'm really good at. If you haven't found it, and in Rollins, we're fortunate coming from the Rollins background. There's a couple classes. There's a book they use called Designing Your Life, and it's in some of the coursework for students across the campus, not just business students, where you can figure that out. But I think, at least for what I'm doing in the circles I run in now, these kind of topics are always top of mind to me too about thinking about this. I'm also a big fan of history, so I love history books and all that too. But yeah, that's probably what I would say for especially someone in your target audience here that's in college and not sure like what do I want to do with my life? At least, and again, I'll say this again because I think it's so important. It bears repeating. Like when you're 23 or 24, you probably aren't going to know what you want to do for the rest of your life, and that is okay. Like you don't have to know that. And you could start taking steps towards a direction of self discovery, which is really what the important thing is to figure out like, what am I good at? What's my passion? And I'm not saying go for your passion and just drop everything else because that's not reality. This Professor Galloway guy that I listen to sometimes says, because if someone tells you like pursue your passion, it's probably because they're already a multimillionaire and they've already made a lot of money, and they probably made their money doing like iron smelting or something very generic that you would be. They printed newspapers or something like. So yes, you can have passions, and if you can find a thing where your job is your passion, that's even better. But reality is, you might have that duality of like I have a job and I make money and I love what I'm doing and I'm good at it, but I also have other things outside my life, and it's important to do that because you need to have your family, you need to have hobbies, interests, opportunities to volunteer, like a holistic life, not just about work, because it's easy to get sucked into that, as I'm sure a
right.
lot.
Because your job isn't your life. It's almost just as Matt says, it's a vehicle to get what you want out of life. And
Yes,
I'm sorry, I forgot to tell you, Matt, he's with a new hire, so he's back there today. He wanted to meet you, and he says hello. I'm sorry he can't be
my
here.
pleasure. Yeah, tell him go Tars for me too. No, and I'm glad he's got you. I think he's a smart guy to have brought you in there, and that you guys are doing this. Again in this day and age of communication. The access to books, to podcasts, to learning, whether it's YouTube, podcasts, the things you're doing here, there's just no excuse for somebody who wants to learn to not have opportunity because there's free. If you have an internet connection, you can get free material all the time. So one of the principles, being a Rollins double alum, I guess undergrad and graduate school, is we believe in lifelong learning, and that has really become more of a reality to me. And it's not just because I have this quest for knowledge, but there's a rejuvenation that happens in your brain. And now in my new role with executive education, one of the things that I found when I've been out of the classroom for a while, and you go back into a classroom with other people who also are leaders and they want to learn, like your brain starts to light up. Parts of it that you didn't use for a long time, all of a sudden you start thinking differently. You start considering things from a different point of view. So that's why I would encourage you, and I know you already do this, but all your listeners, like constantly don't ever assume that you've reached this plateau where you're it's the fixed mindset of like I've already got all the knowledge I can have. We don't. You don't. I don't. Anybody who does that, I wouldn't slam dunk them and say they're not with it, but I would question that and be a little bit, I
Right.
got that, right? So yeah, it's so a good idea to always be learning. And so I commend you again for doing what you're doing because this is a great opportunity for others to learn from your experiences and from Matt's experiences too.
Yeah, no, I thank you so much, Professor Kroll. And I didn't mean to, by talking about mine, I didn't mean to take away for those that are 23, 24, or even 53, 54. It doesn't matter your age, but just as you said about that business owner, it's that started his business, his profitable business when he was 50 something. It's never too late to start. And
But
those that think they may know it all, that's an awfully closed-minded mindset, and one I plan to never possess.
yeah,
So,
the guy that you remind me a lot of too is Ted Lasso. Jason's
oh,
character.
what a compliment. Thanks.
Yeah, yeah, and I think one of the quotes that he has, I use this little clip in my undergrad classes now, is the word he says, he attributes to Walt Whitman, but I'm not sure Walt Whitman actually said it from the research I've done, but it's the be curious, not judgmental, when he's
Yes.
throwing dart scenes there, right? And he says that. And I think it's just a great way to approach life. And it's true about, and this is the thing for your listener, I want them to take away as we're finishing up, like be curious and not judgmental about others, but also be that way about yourself. Like when something doesn't go the way you planned, don't judge yourself and come down and go, I should have done this, I should have done that. It's what they call it in psychology, like shitting all over yourself. Like you're just
Yeah.
should have done this, I should have done that. But instead, go, okay, yeah, I failed it based on my expectations, but what? Let me be curious. What led me to that? What got me here? What could I have done differently? Like do this debrief, and then don't put judgment on it. And if you do that for yourself, then it becomes a whole lot easier with other people. And if you find other folks that are, you find a friend or two that are willing to do that with you and really be authentic. And I'm speaking to the guys primarily because most women do this. It's a natural uh, aspect of women's lives typically. It's harder for guys. And I don't mean that stereotypically, but just kind of as a general rule. Um, we need to do better. Guys do with like really connecting in an authentic way and talking about what's going on in our lives and not being silent. To take a different angle on your silent service. Part of the silent service is not being silent with other guys, especially when they need to be authentic. So, yeah,
I love that. And I've I've actually written down Be Curious, Not Judgmental a handful of times because I love that show. But I never really flipped it back on myself and asked myself if I was doing that toward myself. So there you go again, teach me something else.
no, my pleasure, Will. No, and likewise, like I said, the
Thank you.
intergenerational learning is an ongoing thing. So I feel I got asked a couple of years ago to be a DJ for a couple hours on WPRK, which for those that don't know is the local college radio station at Rollins, and I got to go do some '80s music with a student who was a DJ, and she did some modern. And we did a little comparison of like protest music from two generations, and so that was a milestone for me because growing up we had the radio and so I checked that box, and now I feel like I'm progressing by 50 years because now I'm doing a podcast with you. So I feel incredibly blessed and fortunate to be number one connected with the man Will Diesel and who you are, and also just be part of this experience. So I'll say again, like thank you for having me on, and hello and greetings to all the fellow alums that are out there too. I miss all of you because I have many fond memories of so many different folks that you were peers with that have come before, and I'm sure we'll have more of those because knowing that in the past we had people like you, there won't be another Will Diesel. Let me just say that up front. There will be other students that stand out and are going to make a mark on my life, and I hope I do the same with them too. So thank you for having me again today too.
Yeah, of course, Professor Kroll, if it's okay with you, I'd love to have you get on the future next time with Matt, so you can meet somebody that's also had a profoundly positive impact on my life as well.
Absolutely, that'd be great. That'd be great. I'd love to do that.
Yeah, amazing. Well, listener, thank you so much for being here with us today. We will see you in the next episode.